Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is your essential shortcut, really, to understanding our rapidly changing world.
It really does feel like that, doesn't it? The global news cycle, it just spins faster and faster.
Yeah, constantly throwing more information at us than, frankly, anyone could possibly process. That feeling of overload,
Information overload, exactly. You blink and suddenly there's a new scientific breakthrough or some fresh geopolitical tension. We all know that feeling.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where we come in. Our mission here at the Deep Dive is really to cut through all that noise.
Mm-hmm. We take a stack of today's most important sources, articles, research, our own notes, and we try to distill them, get down to the core nuggets of knowledge and insight.
The goal is to arm you with surprising facts, vital context, so you can feel genuinely well-informed. But, without feeling buried by it all.
Precisely. And today, July 9th, 2025, it's a perfect example of that global complexity we're talking about.
So we're embarking on a pretty comprehensive deep dive into the day's news. We'll be spanning everything from, mind-bending science
to the simmering geopolitical tensions that are, reshaping our world. Plus, market shifts, environmental challenges.
It's a lot. Our commitment is to present diverse perspectives and, crucially, to connect the dots, across topics that might seem unrelated, but actually paint a bigger picture.
So let's begin this exploration.
Okay, let's kick things off by navigating the ever-complex world of international relations. Let's focus first on the United States and its evolving foreign policy under former President Donald Trump.
Yeah, we're seeing some really dynamic, almost you could say contradictory signals coming out of his approach, especially concerning Ukraine and Russia.
Right. What's going on there?
Well, a particularly striking development is this apparent shift in policy regarding military aid to Ukraine. Just last week, reports indicated the Trump administration had announced they were withholding weapon shipments.
Withholding. Including what?
Including crucial things like the advanced Patriot interceptor missiles. Now, this decision came amid concerns over depleting U.S. military stocks.
Oh, right. I heard something about that. The U.S. doesn't have that many.
Apparently, the Pentagon only possesses about 25% of the Patriot interceptors needed for its own defense plans. So that naturally raised, significant international concern about Ukraine's ability to defend itself.
Okay, so on one hand, a practical concern about U.S. inventory, and on the other, a decision that could directly impact Ukraine's defense capabilities. Big deal.
Definitely. But then, in quite a significant turn, President Trump has more recently declared that the United States will send new weapons to Ukraine.
Wait, so first withholding, now sending.
Exactly. Responding, he says, to rising tensions and aerial attacks. This sudden change after those earlier reports, it does raise questions.
Yeah, what's really driving this? Is it, tactical maneuvering? Or is it a direct response to immediate realities on the ground, maybe realizing how serious things are getting with Russian aggression?
Well, it really points to the complexities, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Managing foreign aid, military readiness, all in the middle of a live conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And we also see this dynamism in Trump's direct rhetoric toward Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Oh, yeah. What's he been saying?
Well, Trump has publicly expressed frustration. He said he's not happy and accused Putin of spreading, the word he used was bulls regarding the situation in Ukraine, even reportedly considering sanctions.
Right. And the language gets even more forceful than that, doesn't it?
It does. There were reports of a leaked audio clip, though. Importantly, it's unverified by the Kremlin, where Trump allegedly threatened to, and this is a direct quote, bomb the SS out of Moscow if Russia attacked Ukraine.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
How do you even interpret language like that in, international diplomacy? It's certainly unconventional.
It is. But what's maybe just as crucial to note is the Kremlin's response to this very strong language.
How'd they react? Calmly?
Remarkably so. Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, basically noted that Trump's harsh rhetoric aligns with his communication style and that it doesn't deter Moscow from diplomatic engagement.
Interesting. So they're kind of shrugging it off.
To an extent. Peskov even highlighted Trump's acknowledgement that resolving the Ukraine crisis is more difficult than anticipated. And this, in a sort of surprising alignment, resonates with Russia's long-held view.
Which is?
That a political resolution needs considerable time and, crucially, a binding framework. So it suggests maybe a shared understanding of the conflict's complexity, even amidst all these fiery exchanges.
Huh. Meanwhile, Ukraine itself. President Zelensky must be feeling the pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He has, in turn, ordered intensified contacts with the United States, pushing for accelerated arms deliveries. It underscores the urgent need on the ground.
Makes sense.
And at the same time, Russia has indicated they're ready for a third round of direct peace talks. They're awaiting Ukraine's response on dates.
So diplomacy is still happening, at least notionally.
It seems so. Previous rounds, remember, were held in Turkey, which has been a key mediator. Those led to some draft proposals and prisoner exchanges. So there is a precedent.
Okay. But connecting this back to the people in Ukraine, how are they feeling about all this?
Well, that's where it gets quite sobering. A recent survey by the Kiev International Institute of Sociology, KIS they call it, reveals a really significant shift in Ukrainian public sentiment.
How so?
Nearly half, 47% of Ukrainians now anticipate national ruin and significant population loss by 2035.
Wow, that's bleak.
It's a sharp decline in optimism from previous years. I mean, compare that to October 2022, when optimism was recorded at 88%. A huge drop.
What's driving that pessimism?
Well, it's partly attributed to frustration with U.S. policy, maybe these mixed signals we talked about, and also skepticism about their own Ukrainian leadership's ability to negotiate peace effectively.
Understandable, I suppose.
And the survey also indicates that support for territorial concessions, giving up land for peace, has increased significantly. Nearly 40% of Ukrainians are now apparently willing to cede land.
That's a massive shift. It really points to a dangerous tipping point, doesn't it? This combination of maybe wavering external support, the escalating rhetoric, and this declining domestic optimism.
It suggests that prolonged conflict, especially when you perceive inconsistencies and outside help, can really erode a nation's will to fight, and that potentially opens avenues for peace, but maybe on terms that were previously deemed unacceptable.
Yeah, it sounds like the ground realities are shifting towards a sort of desperate search for resolution, whatever the cost might be.
Exactly. So the big question is, how do all these dynamics from the highest levels of leadership down to these deep shifts in public mood, how do they influence the prospects for a lasting peace? It's incredibly complex.
Indeed. Okay, let's shift focus slightly, but stay within the U.S. Beyond foreign policy, the domestic political landscape there also presents its own set of, well, profound challenges that definitely ripple outwards. They influence America's global standing.
Absolutely. And one of the most significant recent developments on that front is the Supreme Court's final green light for former President Trump's order allowing for essentially mass firings across the federal government.
Mass firings. How does that work?
It basically empowers the executive branch to make really significant personnel changes across various agencies. Think about replacing career civil servants more easily. This could have profound implications for institutional stability, for governance within the United States.
So depending on your view, it's either a way for a president to implement their mandate efficiently.
Right, ensuring loyalty and getting things done.
Or it's a weakening of civil service protections.
Yeah.
Potentially politicizing government functions, regardless of who's in charge.
Exactly. It's a really fundamental change. And it's seen very differently depending on your political perspective.
That's a monumental ruling. Affects thousands of careers, the very function of a government. And speaking of internal scrutiny, what's this about Comey and Brennan?
Right. Former FBI Director James Comey and former CIA Director John Brennan are reportedly under investigation. This concerns their ties to the whole Russia interference probe and alleged false statements made during that time.
Okay, still digging into that. And Tulsi Gabbard.
Separately, Tulsi Gabbard, who used to be a Democratic congresswoman but has shifted politically, is reportedly demanding access to intelligence agency emails. She wants to identify individuals within the intelligence community who she believes might be undermining the Trump agenda.
Wow. So a real internal battle playing out.
Well, what's crucial to understand here is how these internal investigations and allegations reflect really deep-seated divisions, a struggle for control, maybe, within the U.S. political and intelligence apparatus.
Raises big questions about accountability, trust.
Profound questions, yes, about the role of intelligence agencies in a democracy, who watches the watchers, all of that. It's an ongoing debate.
And how does the public feel amidst all this?
Well, connecting this to the broader public mood, a recent Gallup poll indicates that American pride is actually at its lowest point in 25 years.
Lowest in 25 years.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yes. Only 58% of Americans feel extremely or very proud to be American. That figure reflects, deep political polarization, other societal issues. It suggests a significant period of national introspection, maybe even disillusionment.
That's a really stark indicator of internal discord. And adding to these internal debates, what about this birthright citizenship issue?
Right. Donald Trump's stance on revoking birthright citizenship from children born in the U.S. but whose parents are temporary residents, well, it's drawn sharp comparisons by critics to policies from Nazi Germany.
That's a heavy comparison.
It is. And it raises serious concerns about fundamental rights, the very definition of citizenship in the U.S. This debate touches upon foundational legal principles, the country's identity as a nation of immigrants. It's deeply divisive.
So you take all these things together, the internal political battles, these shifts in public sentiment, these profound policy debates. What's the collective impact? How does it affect the nation's global standing, its ability to act cohesively on the world stage?
Well, the classic thinking is that a nation fractured internally often struggles to project a unified and credible front externally. It can certainly complicate diplomacy and alliances.
Makes sense. Okay, from the U.S., let's turn our attention to the Middle East.
Yeah.
A region that, well, it continues to be a nexus of shifting alliances and, frankly, persistent crises.
Yeah, the focus there remains heavily on Gaza ceasefire efforts. We've seen former President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meet for a second time recently to discuss these ongoing negotiations.
What came out of that meeting?
A key part of their discussion reportedly centered on addressing the critical fuel shortage in Gaza. That shortage has just severely exacerbated the already dire humanitarian situation for millions of people there.
Fuel is critical for everything: hospitals, water.
Everything. Reports also suggest broader discussions were had around Israel's real plan for post-war Gaza, including potential resettlement, which is obviously hugely controversial, and some very, let's say, creative ideas have come to light.
Creative? Like what? You mentioned controversial.
Well, reports suggest the Tony Blair Institute, that's a UK-based think tank, contributed to some conceptual post-genocide Gaza plans. And these reportedly included ideas like, get this, a Trump Riviera and an Elon Musk smart manufacturing zone.
This Trump Riviera in Gaza. An Elon Musk zone. Seriously.
Reportedly. These are, as you can imagine, highly controversial suggestions. They raise massive questions, not just about feasibility, but the ethical implications. Planning luxury developments or tech hubs in a conflict-ravaged territory, especially concerning the future and self-determination of the local population.
Yeah, it highlights a huge disconnect, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Between that kind of high-level conceptualizing and the actual lived realities on the ground.
Absolutely. It really begs the question, how do these grand, seemingly disconnected development plans factor into the lived realities and, importantly, the long-term aspirations of the local population in Gaza? It seems worlds apart.
While that's happening, what about the regional politics, the alliances?
Well, alongside these discussions, we're witnessing a really significant shift in Middle Eastern geopolitics. Specifically, the Saudi Arabia-Iran rapprochement seems to be solidifying.
Rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. How so?
Saudi Arabia now appears to be backing Tehran following a recent Israeli offensive. This is a dramatic turnaround from Trump's previous efforts, remember the Abraham Accords, which aimed to foster closer ties between Riyadh and Tel Aviv.
A huge reversal. So who met?
Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, as he's known, recently held what were described as fruitful talks in Jeddah, which is a major city in Saudi Arabia.
Fruitful talks. That signals a potential détente, right? Between two powers that have been adversaries for decades.
Exactly. It could fundamentally reshape regional dynamics, potentially reduce some long-standing tensions and proxy conflicts. It's a major development to watch.
Definitely. What else is happening with Iran?
Well, on another front, Iranian sources, specifically via Press TV, which is state-affiliated, report that Iran is in a state of full readiness. They say they're anticipating a potential new war that they claim Israel is eager to initiate.
And they think Trump would support Israel in that.
That's what the report suggests. It's a highly provocative statement coming from Iranian state media, certainly signaling potential escalation or at least trying to project strength.
But is there another side to that story about Iran's actual capabilities?
Yes. Countering that narrative, the French spy chief has publicly stated that the Iran nuclear program is, quote, extremely delayed. This suggests a different reality regarding Iran's immediate nuclear capabilities, perhaps pushing back against the idea of an imminent threat requiring preemptive action.
So, conflicting reports, highlighting the information warfare that often runs parallel to diplomacy and military posturing.
Precisely. The Middle East remains this incredibly complex nexus, shifting power dynamics, immense humanitarian challenges. You have these diplomatic moves, these audacious development proposals, conflicting intelligence reports.
And the big question is always, what does it all mean for regional stability? and maybe more importantly, for the lives of millions of people caught in the middle.
The stakes, as always in that region, are incredibly high, and the path forward remains, well, deeply uncertain.
Okay, let's pivot from the complexities of the Middle East to Europe, a continent grappling with its own set of internal and external challenges, many of which, as we've seen, are interconnected with these broader global flashpoints.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key dynamics playing out right now involves the European Union, China, and Russia.
How so?
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has publicly accused China of supporting Russia's war economy. She basically warned that the future of EU-China relations hinges critically on Beijing's stance towards the war in Ukraine.
So, choose a side, essentially.
That's the message. China, for its part, has consistently denied aiding Russia militarily and emphasizes its objective stance, favoring peace and negotiation. But this really underscores a growing geopolitical rift and the pressure Europe is trying to exert on China regarding sanctions and alignment with Western interests.
It's a very clear warning from Brussels, a potential red line for future engagement. But then, aren't there some differing views within Europe?
There are. Surprisingly, we have Czech President Petr Pavel, remember, he's a former NATO general, usually quite hawkish, calling for the European Union to reconsider its stance towards Russia.
Reconsider? How?
He suggested that negotiations and even a restoration of business ties should follow the resolution of the Ukraine conflict. He acknowledged what he termed the unsustainable nature of the ongoing war and, critically, the unlikelihood of Ukraine swiftly reclaiming lost territory without, huge casualties.
That's quite a pragmatic viewpoint from him. Suggests the potential shift in thinking.
It's certainly controversial, but yes. Coming from a figure like Pavel, who previously held a very uncompromising position, it might reflect a growing recognition in some European circles that a political resolution, however imperfect, might be the only viable path to ending the human and economic toll.
But even as that debate happens at the high level,
Yeah.
what's going on underneath?
Well, parallel to these diplomatic shifts, European intelligence officials are warning of an escalating Russian sabotage campaign across the continent.
Sabotage? Seriously?
Yes. They report that Russia is resorting to using, quote, amateurs for these operations, apparently because hundreds of Moscow's professional spies were expelled from various European nations after the invasion of Ukraine.
Amateurs? Like what kind of operations?
For example, in London, England, 3 men were recently convicted of aggravated arson. The attack was explicitly linked by authorities to Russia's Wagner group. They reportedly burned down a warehouse simply for cash.
Wow. So, high-level talk of negotiation, but on the ground, almost petty crime linked to state-sponsored sabotage. It's quite a contrast.
It really highlights the complex layers of engagement and conflict happening simultaneously.
Meanwhile, what about intra-European relations, like France and the UK?
Well, French President Emmanuel Macron has been on a state visit to the UK. He's been calling for support on issues relating to Gaza and Ukraine, and he toasted ever closer UK-France ties with King Charles, emphasizing unity and cooperation. Looks smooth on the surface.
Right.
But beneath that, back in France, financial investigators recently raided the Paris headquarters of the right-wing National Rally Party, the RN, led by Marine Le Pen.
Ah, politically motivated.
The party leadership certainly criticized the action as exactly that, politically motivated harassment. This raises questions about political fairness, especially with elections potentially on the horizon.
And how does that internal political stuff affect diplomacy?
Well, it raises that question. How do internal political pressures and perceptions of maybe targeted investigations impact a nation's ability to project a unified diplomatic front, even with close allies like the UK? It can certainly complicate things.
Okay. And finally, you mentioned Libya.
Yes, Libya. North African nation, still politically divided between 2 rival governments since 2011. And it's a critical transit point for migrants trying to reach Europe.
What's the latest development there?
Libya's eastern government, based in Benghazi, recently declared several EU and southern European officials persona non grata, basically banned them from entering the region.
Why?
They cited violations of diplomatic procedures. This happened right after the delegation had met with the rival government, the internationally recognized Government of National Unity, or GNU, based in Tripoli, the capital.
And what were they meeting about?
Discussing cooperation on migration and combating human smuggling. So the Eastern government essentially shut down contact after the officials met with their rivals, shows the deep divisions still hindering crucial cooperation.
So looking across Europe, high-level diplomacy on China, street-level crime linked to Russia, French internal politics, Libya's divisions blocking migration talks.
It's a really complex picture. It is. From the grand scale of EU-China relations down to these very specific incidents, you see geopolitical tensions manifesting in so many different ways.
And the long-term implications for stability and security on the continent, especially with ongoing challenges like energy, immigration, and just maintaining internal political coherence.
It's a very fractured yet deeply interconnected landscape, lots of moving parts, lots of uncertainty.
All right, beyond the major power blocks, let's touch on some other significant global political developments. These often highlight evolving national priorities, relationships, sometimes in unexpected ways.
Okay, let's start in the Caribbean. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Kamala Persad-Bissessar. Her absence from the recent CARICOM heads of government meeting has raised some eyebrows.
CARICOM being the Caribbean Community Group. Why the concern?
Well, there are concerns about her commitment to regional cooperation. This is particularly notable because her government is trying to foster new energy alliances in the Caribbean, especially after that big Dragon gas field deal with Venezuela fell through due to U.S. sanctions.
So her absence seems like a missed opportunity to push that new strategy.
Exactly. A missed chance to articulate that strategic pivot and maybe reinforce regional solidarity. It could signal a more inward-looking approach, which might worry neighbors.
This is a bit of a mixed signal for sure. Okay. Shifting to North Africa, Tunisia, what's happening there?
Well, there's a bit of a dual narrative. On one hand, a Tunisian court has sentenced several former officials to lengthy prison terms after convicting them of corruption. This is part of President Kais Saied's ongoing efforts to combat corruption, which many support.
Okay, anti-corruption sounds good. What's the other side?
Separately, opposition leader Rach Ghannouchi and some others were also sentenced in a different case. This signals a broader crackdown on dissenting voices and raises concerns about the state of democracy and political freedoms in Tunisia.
Ah, so the anti-corruption drive might be used to target opponents.
That's the concern. While tackling corruption is often necessary, when it happens alongside actions against prominent opposition figures, it naturally raises legitimate questions about the true intent and the impact on democratic space and freedom of expression. It's a tricky balance.
Definitely. And then Russia banning Yale.
Yes, that's quite a move. Russia has officially banned Yale University, the prestigious American institution, from operating within its borders. They've listed it as an undesirable organization.
Undesirable? Why? What's the accusation?
Moscow explicitly accuses Yale's Maurice R. Greenberg World Fellows Program of attempting to interfere in Russia's internal affairs. They claim the program trains foreign opposition leaders, specifically naming figures like the late Alexei Navalny and his associate Leonid Volkov.
Wow, that's a very direct accusation against a university program, essentially accusing them of meddling.
It's a strong assertion of sovereignty, or perhaps viewed by critics as a way to suppress dissent and limit external influence. It certainly marks a new low in academic and diplomatic relations between the two countries.
Definitely sends a chilling message. Okay, moving over to Asia.
In Asia, Japan and Canada have just inked a key intelligence sharing deal.
Why is that significant?
It's seen as another important step towards deepening ties between Japan and individual members of the Five Eyes intelligence grouping. Remember, that's the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada.
So strengthening security alliances in the Indo-Pacific.
Exactly. It reflects an ongoing trend as nations in the region seek to bolster their intelligence capabilities and maybe counter perceived threats, often with China in mind.
Got it. And finally, this story about Venezuelan migrants in El Salvador. This sounds concerning.
It is. Salvadoran authorities have confirmed something quite significant. The U.S. government, under former President Trump, retains full jurisdiction over a group of Venezuelan migrants who were deported from the U.S. to El Salvador back in March.
Deported to a third country? And the U.S. still has jurisdiction.
Apparently, these migrants are being detained in El Salvador's Maximum Security Terrorism Confinement Center, known as CECOT. This is under a reported $6 million arrangement between the U.S. and El Salvadorian governments.
And why is this confirmation significant?
Because it directly contradicts earlier claims by the Trump administration. They had suggested that these deportees were no longer under U.S. authority once they were expelled from U.S. territory.
So the U.S. is essentially paying El Salvador to detain these people and still considers them under U.S. jurisdiction.
That appears to be the situation confirmed by Salvadoran officials. And it raises significant human rights concerns regarding their treatment, especially given reports from organizations like Human Rights Watch about alleged torture and inhumane conditions within that CECOT facility.
That's deeply troubling. So, looking at all these varied actions, regional alliances shifting, internal crackdowns, challenging academic freedom, controversial deportation deals, What's the connecting thread?
Well, it seems to reflect a broader global trend, doesn't it? Nations are asserting their sovereignty more forcefully, trying to manage external influences, whether those are perceived threats or unwanted scrutiny. But often, these actions come with significant human rights implications, both domestically and internationally.
Yeah, it feels like a world where countries are increasingly looking inwards, maybe becoming more defensive, while still trying to navigate this complex, interconnected external environment.
And that navigation leads sometimes to cooperation, like the Japan-Canada deal, but often to escalating tensions and these really difficult human rights situations.
All right, let's shift gears completely now, away from the often grim realities of geopolitics. Let's dive into the incredible advancements happening in science and innovation. This is where we see humanity really pushing the boundaries of what's possible, often in amazing ways.
It's a welcome change of pace, isn't it? And we have some truly groundbreaking breakthroughs in biotechnology and medicine to talk about.
Lay it on me. What's new?
Okay, first up, researchers at the University of Beijing in China. They recently achieved a really significant milestone, enabling mice to regrow missing ear tissue.
Regrow ear tissue. How?
By reactivating a specific gene that basically had become inactive during the course of evolution. It was switched off, and they managed to switch it back on in these mice.
Wow. So the potential implications.
Huge. It suggests a powerful potential to reawaken these dormant regenerative pathways in mammals, maybe even humans. This could lead to entirely new treatments for injuries, for congenital defects, essentially unlocking a capacity for self-repair within our own biology that we thought was largely lost.
The idea of regrowing body parts. It always sounds like science fiction, but maybe it's getting closer.
It seems so. And then equally fascinating, a story from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Biologists there have genetically reprogrammed E. coli bacteria.
E. coli? Isn't that usually bad news?
Well, not this strain. They've reprogrammed it to keep plastic waste. You know, the stuff water bottles are made of.
Okay, eat plastic, and then what?
And then produce acetaminophen, which most of us know as paracetamol or Tylenol, a common painkiller.
Wait, bacteria eating plastic and making painkillers.
Exactly. What's truly revolutionary here is the dual benefit. On one hand, you have a novel, potentially sustainable method for managing plastic waste, tackling this massive environmental challenge.
Right, plastic pollution is everywhere.
And on the other hand, you have an innovative approach to producing a widely used pharmaceutical compound directly from what was previously considered useless, harmful waste.
That's incredible. Tackling pollution and making medicine in one go.
Imagine, it's elegant biological engineering. These scientific leaps aren't just, transformative potential in theory. They represent a fundamental reimagining of our relationship with biology, with resources.
Yeah, a future where the body can repair itself better, where our waste streams become like factories for essential goods.
It challenges conventional industrial models. It could fundamentally redefine both health and environmental management in the years to come. Really exciting stuff.
Definitely. And beyond biotech, our planet itself keeps revealing secrets, right? Unseen life, surprising evolutionary twists.
Absolutely. There was an extraordinary discovery recently. Black eggs surfaced from the really dark depths of the ocean off the coast of Australia.
Black eggs from the deep sea. What was inside?
A previously unknown species of flatworm. Now, flatworms might not sound glamorous, but this discovery challenges our current understanding of ocean biodiversity, especially the distribution of life in these extreme marine environments.
So we still don't know everything that's down there.
Not even close. This find adds to the growing evidence that life in the deep ocean is far more complex, far more interconnected than we previously thought. It really highlights how much remains undiscovered in our own oceans. Still frontiers to explore right here.
A good reminder. Not exactly aliens, but still fundamentally unknown creatures on our own planet. And then this next one sounds truly mind-bending. Reverse evolution in tomatoes.
Yeah, isn't that wild? Scientists observed a species of tomatoes in the western Galapagos Islands. That's the archipelago off the coast of Ecuador, famous for Darwin's finches. These tomatoes are exhibiting a form of reverse evolution.
Meaning what exactly? They're going backward.
Essentially, yes. They're reverting to ancestral characteristics that they had previously lost through evolution. The phenomenon is known as devolution.
Devolution. So evolution isn't just a straight line forward.
Apparently not always. It suggests a far greater complexity to evolutionary pathways than we might assume. It implies this remarkable plasticity, this flexibility in plant life. It challenges some fundamental assumptions about how evolution works.
What can we learn from these backward tomatoes?
Well, by studying them, scientists hope to gain deeper insights into how species adapt and respond to changing environments. Sometimes adaptation might involve revisiting traits from their distant past. It's a powerful reminder that evolution isn't always a one-way street, and the genetic blueprint can hold some real surprises.
So these discoveries, hidden deep-sea creatures, tomatoes evolving backward, they really tell us about the hidden wonders, the unexpected adaptability of life right here on Earth.
It's humbling, isn't it? A reminder that we're still just scratching the surface of Earth's biological marvels and the incredible resilience of life.
Definitely. Okay, let's look outwards now. Beyond Earth biology, we're continually exploring the universe and also reevaluating our own ancient past, redefining where we come from, maybe where we might be going.
Right. And NASA's Perseverance rover is a great example, still hard at work on Mars.
What's it been up to lately?
It's been investigating clay-bearing rocks on a feature called the Crocodilian Plateau within Jezero Crater. These clays are super interesting scientifically.
Why clays?
Because clays form in the presence of water, so studying them offers crucial insights into Mars's ancient, water-rich environment, which is, of course, a key factor in understanding if life ever existed there.
The big question. Has it been moving much?
It has. The rover recently set a new record, traveling over 411 meters, that's like 4.5 football fields in a single Martian day, or sol, shows its incredible navigation capability.
Impressive. And didn't I hear something about Make-A-Wish?
Yes, a really wonderful human element to the mission. It involved Make-A-Wish participants who got to name key rover targets on Mars, so they literally left their mark on another planet. A nice touch.
That's truly amazing. Our reach extending millions of miles, but still connected to these deeply human stories. Okay, from Mars to something even more fundamental, recreating the Big Bang.
Well, sort of. Scientists at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, that's the huge facility on the border of France and Switzerland, they're creating plasma that is hotter than the core of our sun.
Hotter than the sun's core. Why?
Their aim is to produce something called quark-gluon plasma. This is a state of matter believed to have existed just fractions of a second after the Big Bang, the very beginning of our universe.
And what do they hope to learn by doing that?
This kind of work directly challenges the standard model of particle physics. That's basically our best current framework for understanding the fundamental particles and forces that make up everything.
So they're looking for cracks in the standard model.
Exactly. By recreating the extreme conditions of the early universe, they hope to uncover new physics, potentially pointing to entirely new laws of reality that govern the cosmos. It's truly pushing the absolute limits of our understanding.
Mind-boggling stuff.
Yes.
Speaking of reshaping our understanding, what about Easter Island, Rapa Nui?
Right. Recent research has really upended the long-standing myth about Rapa Nui. That's the remote island in the southeastern Pacific Ocean, famous for its giant statues, the moai.
The myth being that its civilization developed in complete isolation, cut off from everyone.
Exactly. That's been the dominant narrative for a long time. But new evidence suggests its famous ceremonial platforms, the Ahu, where the statue stood, actually predate European arrival by over 700 years.
Okay, older than thought.
Yeah.
What else?
What's more, the way these platforms were built may have influenced construction on other Polynesian islands. This indicates an extensive, interconnected network of Polynesian cultures that were traversing vast ocean distances, sharing knowledge and technology, rather than living in seclusion.
So not isolated at all, but part of a wider Polynesian world.
Precisely. It completely rewrites a chapter of human history and our understanding of ancient navigation and cultural exchange. It shows a far more advanced and connected past than previously believed for these seafaring peoples.
Fascinating. So all these discoveries, from the tiniest particles at CERN to ancient civilizations being reinterpreted to rovers exploring distant planets, they really show how we're continually reshaping our understanding.
Constantly. Where we come from, where we might be going. It's a constant evolution of knowledge, broadening our horizons with every new piece of information we uncover.
Absolutely. And speaking of knowledge and contributing to it, there's an incredible example of how even you, our listener, can directly get involved in addressing global challenges, even, believe it or not, during your vacation.
Yeah, it's all thanks to the power of citizen science. And a particularly striking example is NASA's Fjord Fido project.
Fjord Fido, what does it do?
It engages tourists, regular people on expedition cruise ships in Antarctica, the Earth's southernmost continent, to collect scientific samples and data.
What kind of data?
Data on phytoplankton. Those are the microscopic marine algae that form the base of the ocean food web and play a huge role in climate and also general ocean conditions like temperature and salinity.
So tourists are collecting real scientific data in Antarctica. How's it working out?
Amazingly well. In its first 2 years, a remarkable 97% of the participants reported that the citizen science aspect significantly enriched their travel experience. They loved it.
I bet. It's not just sightseeing anymore.
Exactly. It's not just about data collection, it's about fostering environmental responsibility. Participants feel like they're directly contributing to critical climate change research in one of the most vital and vulnerable ecosystems on the planet.
That's incredible. You go on this bucket list trip to Antarctica, see penguins and icebergs, and you come back not just with amazing photos, but having acted as a contributing scientist.
It really highlights how collaborative efforts can beautifully bridge tourism and scientific research. It turns what could be a passive vacation into essentially a vital scientific expedition.
It's just an amazing example of how individuals can directly contribute to tackling global challenges, even during their leisure time, empowering people to be part of the solution, even in the most remote corners of the world. Really inspiring. Okay, let's pivot now to technology. Innovation is just surging forward at an astonishing pace. But, as always, not without its shadows. We're seeing this rapid evolution and at the same time this global struggle to figure out how to effectively regulate artificial intelligence, or AI.
It's that classic balancing act, isn't it? Innovation versus control, and you see it playing out very differently in different places.
Like where?
Well, in Europe, a coalition of CEOs from 44 major European companies, we're talking big names like Airbus, BNP Paribas, Philips, they've formally requested a 2-year pause on the European Union's new AI regulation.
A 2-year pause. Why?
Their argument is that the proposed regulation is overly complex and, more critically, they feel it jeopardizes Europe's competitiveness in the global AI landscape. They worry it could stifle innovation right as the race is intensifying with the US and China.
So European industry leaders are basically hitting the brakes saying, hold on, this is too much, too fast, it could hurt us.
That's the message they're sending. But then you look at the United States and you see a very different, much more decentralized approach.
And so?
The U.S. Senate recently voted overwhelmingly 99-1 against a provision that tried to put a 10-year moratorium on individual states regulating AI.
So the opposite of the EU approach, empowering states.
Exactly. This decision effectively gives states the green light to implement their own regulatory frameworks for AI.
Which could lead to,
well, potentially a patchwork of regulations across the country. You know, different rules in California than in Texas or New York. A very different legal and operational environment compared to the EU's more centralized, bloc-wide approach.
So this prompts that big question, right? As AI advances so rapidly everywhere, how should governments balance fostering innovation with establishing robust oversight, protecting consumer rights, preventing abuses?
It's the core dilemma. The EU's cautious, centralized path contrasts sharply with the US's more decentralized, states-empowered model. Both have pros and cons for AI development, for adoption, and they could lead to really varied competitive landscapes down the road.
Definitely something to watch. And with all this rapid AI advancement, there's that undeniable dark side we mentioned, especially concerning things like deepfakes and the ethical concerns that, frankly, threaten the very fabric of our public discourse, our democratic processes.
Yeah, what's particularly alarming is how AI-generated deepfakes are increasingly undermining trust. Trust in politics, trust in media, trust in what we see and hear.
How sophisticated is the tech now?
It's getting scary good. Capable of creating hyper-realistic fake photos, videos, even voice recordings that sound exactly like a real person. These are potent enough to influence election outcomes, manipulate public opinion on a massive scale.
It's not just about misleading people anymore, is it?
No, it's about fundamentally eroding our ability to discern truth from manipulation, making it harder for citizens like you to make informed decisions based on reliable information. It clouds everything.
And we've seen chilling examples of this being used not just to sway opinion, but to directly target officials, right?
Absolutely. The U.S. State Department was recently put on high alert after a hoaxer used AI to impersonate Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Impersonate the Secretary of State? How?
Using AI-generated voice and text messages to contact other U.S. and foreign officials. This incident highlights really significant concerns about potential information compromise, the vulnerability of official communications channels.
And the FBI had warned about this kind of thing.
They had issued earlier warnings about malicious actors using AI for exactly this kind of impersonation. So this wasn't entirely unexpected, but seeing it happen at such a high level is still jarring.
It really illustrates the practical cybersecurity threats, doesn't it? Moving beyond theory into real-world espionage, disruption.
Precisely. And then, separate but related, we have the controversy surrounding Elon Musk's AI chatbot, Grok.
Ah, yes. What happened there?
It recently stirred up significant controversy because it repeatedly shared anti-Semitic posts and reportedly even praised Hitler in some interactions.
Seriously, an AI chatbot doing that?
Yes. Now, his firm, XAI, moved swiftly to remove the inappropriate content, but the incident raises very serious concerns. Concerns about the oversight, the moderation of these powerful AI-driven technologies, and the ethical implications of AI development when tools like this are released without seemingly adequate safeguards.
It begs the question of responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely. These incidents, taken together, they really underscore the profound threats AI poses to democratic integrity, to public discourse, to basic cybersecurity.
So what's the answer? What do we need?
Well, they highlight the urgent need for robust authentication methods, ways to verify if something is real or AI-generated. Widespread public awareness campaigns are crucial too, so people know this threat exists. And of course, comprehensive regulatory frameworks to protect against technological exploitation and the spread of harmful content.
It's a huge challenge. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, how do you discern truth from manipulation? And what responsibility do AI developers have to prevent these harmful outputs, especially when their creations can mimic real people or spread dangerous ideologies?
It's a question we're all collectively grappling with, and honestly, there are no easy answers right now.
Fair enough. But it's not all doom and gloom, right? AI and technology are also rapidly integrating into business, into our daily lives, creating new opportunities, new efficiencies.
Absolutely. We're definitely witnessing a significant AI investment boom right now. Money is pouring into the sector.
Like where? Any examples?
Well, for instance, the French AI startup Mistral AI is reportedly in discussions to raise up to $1 billion in equity. That's huge, signals immense investor confidence.
$1 billion for one startup. Wow.
And separately, an AI infrastructure startup called LangChain is apparently on the verge of achieving unicorn status. That means being valued at around $1 billion after a new funding round.
So the smart money clearly believes AI's commercial potential is massive.
Seems that way. Suggests a widespread belief that the commercialization of AI is still in its early stages, with vast room for growth.
And how is this impacting everyday consumers right now, like beyond the hype?
Well, you can really see it starting to filter down. Generative AI, or Gen AI, is poised to make a significant impact as a shopping assistant, especially during big sales events like Amazon's Prime Day.
How would that work?
Providing personalized recommendations, enhancing user interactions. Imagine your shopping assistant actually understanding what you want, maybe even anticipating your needs based on past behavior, making the experience smoother, more tailored.
Okay, I can see that. And it's coming to more devices too.
Yes, Google is expanding its Gemini AI assistant beyond just phones. They're bringing it to Wear OS smartwatches, to Android Auto in cars, and to Google TV in the coming months. So AI is becoming much more integrated into our daily tech ecosystems. It'll be ambient, almost.
Interesting. What about China's role in all this? They're a huge player.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating is China's unique AI strategy. There's this narrative emerging that the future of AI might actually be open source and Chinese.
Open source and Chinese?
Yeah.
Despite U.S. chip ban?
Yes. Reports indicate Chinese companies plan to purchase over 115,000 high-tech NVIDIA chips, somehow getting around or navigating the U.S. export bans to power their AI centers for training models. This reflects them increasing adoption of open source AI models, allowing them to build advanced capabilities, even with some hardware limitations.
So they're finding ways to compete, using a different model. Highlights the global competition.
Definitely. It shows different strategic approaches to development and deployment. And AI isn't just consumer tech or national strategy. It's also entering niche areas, like AI coaching.
AI coaching. For what?
Leveraging advanced algorithms and behavioral science to provide personalized leadership development at scale, offering real-time support, feedback, exercises for individuals aiming to improve their professional skills.
So AI is not just chatbots or shopping, it's even helping leaders become better leaders. That's a fascinating application.
It is. And beyond AI, we're seeing significant movement in other tech areas too, like electric mobility.
Right, like Rivian.
Yeah, a Rivian spin-off company called Also has secured an additional $200 million in funding. They're expanding their offerings to include things like e-bikes, furthering their goal of advancing sustainable transportation solutions beyond just electric trucks and SUVs, broadening the scope.
Good to see. And for the consumer tech fans out there, any big product launches?
Yep. Samsung just held its Galaxy Unpacked 2025 event. They announced new devices like the Galaxy Z Fold 7, the Flip 7, their latest foldable phones, and the Galaxy Watch 8, including a classic version with a rotating bezel for those who like that traditional feel.
Always lots of buzz around Unpacked.
Yeah.
And deals. Prime Day is happening.
It is. Amazon Prime Day deals are offering significant discounts. Reports say every pair of Apple AirPods hit its lowest price ever, and popular noise-canceling headphones like the Sony WH-1000 XM5 were discounted by over $100. So, good deals to be had if you're in the market.
Tempting. But amidst all this exciting innovation, new gadgets, AI helpers,
Yeah.
we need that reminder about the shadows, right? Cybersecurity.
Absolutely crucial. TechCrunch recently highlighted the ongoing threat of SIM swap attacks and how to protect your cell phone number.
Remind us what SIM swapping is again.
It's where criminals trick your phone carrier, Verizon, AT&T, whoever, into porting your existing phone number over to their SIM card.
And then they control your number.
Exactly. They effectively hijack your digital identity. And that can grant them access to your bank accounts, credit cards, crypto wallets, any online service linked to that phone number for verification. It's devastating.
Scary stuff.
Yeah.
A potent reminder that as technology becomes more central to our daily lives, protecting your digital identity is absolutely paramount. You have to be vigilant.
You really do. So, considering these massive investments, the new products, the AI everywhere, but also these critical security warnings.
Yeah, it makes you think. How much of your daily life is already touched by AI? And what new opportunities or maybe new risks does this accelerating expansion present for you personally?
Technology's dual nature, the convenience and the danger, it's more evident than ever. It demands our constant attention, our critical thinking.
Okay, let's transition now. Let's look at the economic currents shaping our world and also those increasing environmental pressures that really demand our immediate attention. Global trade, corporate shifts, these are certainly making headlines and impacting economies everywhere.
Yeah. A major factor driving headlines right now is former President Donald Trump's renewed focus on tariffs. A potential tariff war, some are calling it.
What's the latest move?
He has declared there will be no extension on those country-specific tariffs that are set to take effect in early August. These range from 25% up to 40% on imports from 14 different countries.
No extensions.
Yeah.
And he's adding more threats.
He's hardened the threats, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Announcing a new 50% tariff on copper imports, which immediately caused copper futures prices to jump on global markets, and even threatening a massive 200% tariff on pharmaceuticals imported into the U.S.
200%. On medicines.
Yeah.
That would have huge consequences. How's the market reacting?
Well, the S&P 500, which is a key U.S. stock market index, struggled for a second day following these announcements. It shows the immediate market volatility these kinds of protectionist policies can create. Investors get nervous.
These moves clearly reflect Trump's strategy, right?
Yeah.
Using tariffs as leverage, trying to force changes in trade practices.
That seems to be the playbook. But of course, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Other countries are reacting.
Like who?
Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, for example, has publicly warned of weaponized trade because of Trump's looming tariffs. He stated that Malaysia, a key Southeast Asian economy, will not cross certain red lines in negotiations. So nations are pushing back, positioning themselves against what they perceive as aggressive tactics.
And the crucial takeaway for people listening, how does this high-level trade stuff impact them?
Well, these disputes directly impact global supply chains, and disruptions there, plus the tariffs themselves, ultimately affect the prices of goods you see on store shelves, from electronics to clothes to potentially, yes, vital medicines. The connection to your wallet is very real and potentially immediate.
Right. Okay, alongside these trade tensions, what's happening in the corporate world? Mergers, company performance.
Well, amidst the economic challenges, the U.S. market for corporate mergers and acquisitions, M&A, remains surprisingly robust, pretty resilient.
Really? What kind of deals are happening?
We're seeing a clear trend of bigs getting bigger through some really significant deals. Think Broadcom buying VMware for a massive $69 billion, or Pfizer acquiring the biotech firm Seagen for $43 billion. These are huge consolidations reshaping entire industries like tech and pharma.
So the big players are still making moves.
Yeah.
But not everyone's thriving equally. You mentioned Tesla earlier.
Right. Tesla, for instance, observed a 13.5% decrease in its vehicle deliveries in the second quarter of 2023. That's a notable slowdown for a company that has been synonymous with rapid growth in the EV sector.
What could be behind that dip?
Maybe increased competition from other automakers finally catching up, or perhaps broader economic slowdowns impacting consumer spending on big-ticket items like cars. It signals a potential shift for the EV market leader.
Interesting. Meanwhile, across the pond in the UK, what's the business climate like post-Brexit?
Well, the Confederation of British Industry, CBI, which represents UK businesses, has called for urgent action to prevent companies from leaving the UK. They're worried about a potential business exodus.
What do they suggest?
Things like lighter regulations, improved marketing of the UK as a place to invest, and better incentives for investors. They are actively trying to stem the tide and maintain the nation's economic competitiveness, highlighting ongoing concerns.
Okay. And on the environmental regulation front, there's a fight brewing in India.
Yes, quite a significant one. Several major multinational electronics manufacturers, LG, Samsung, Carrier, Dakin, big names, have filed lawsuits against the Indian government.
Over what?
They're contesting new e-waste management regulations. These rules mandate a minimum fee about 22 Indian rupees, or roughly 26 US cents per kilogram of product that producers have to pay to certified recyclers.
Why are they suing over 26 cents a kilo?
The companies argue this significantly increases their operational costs. They claim it's 5 to 15 times higher than existing rates they might have paid voluntarily or under previous schemes. And India's e-waste market is absolutely booming, over 1.7 million metric tons generated just last year. So the scale makes that fee add up quickly.
Ah, I see. It highlights that tension, doesn't it? Between a country's urgent need for environmental rules to manage huge amounts of waste and the economic concerns of major corporations operating there.
Exactly. It forces us to consider how these global business trends, major mergers, trade disputes, local regulations hitting manufacturers are shaping industries and ultimately impacting consumers worldwide. That interplay between policy, profits, and environmental responsibility is just becoming ever more complex and visible.
Indeed. Okay, sticking with economic trends, what about how we pay for things? Digital currency.
Yeah, a recent Trends Journal special report highlights how cryptocurrency and especially mobile payment systems are really becoming the new normal in many places.
Where particularly?
It's particularly evident in China. Cash usage there has just drastically decreased because of the ubiquity of platforms like WeChat Pay and Alipay. Almost everyone pays with their phone for everything.
And this signals a broader shift.
It certainly signals a global movement towards digital currencies, and it puts pressure on traditional financial systems and potentially influences financial policy as central banks around the world consider launching their own digital currencies, or CBDCs.
Right, the digital yuan. Maybe a digital dollar or euro someday.
Exactly. It shows how rapidly consumer payment behavior is changing globally, with China often leading the way in digital adoption.
Okay. And for listeners interested in investing, any specific sectors mentioned?
Well, for those investing in energy stocks, the report mentioned Devon Energy, which is a U.S.-based independent oil and gas producer, and Chevron, the global energy giant. They were highlighted as potentially favorable options due to their strong dividend histories.
But the usual caveats apply.
Absolutely. The standard advice always applies. Approach any investment carefully, do your own research, consider your risk tolerance, no guarantees in the market.
Good advice. And on a lighter, more relatable economic note, the office lunch.
Yes, the office lunch wars are apparently heating up, particularly in London. Pret a Manger, the popular sandwich and coffee chain, has introduced new salads priced at a hefty £30.
£13 for a salad. Wow. Why?
It's reportedly in response to escalating competition in the office lunch market. They're targeting workers seeking convenient and perhaps healthier meal choices, but it also reflects rising food costs that are hitting caterers and restaurants. Even your lunch break is part of a larger economic battle.
Tells you something about inflation right there. Okay, and one more from the UK housing.
Yes, Britain's biggest house builders have agreed to pay $100 million towards affordable homes. This is to avoid potentially damaging legal decision from the competition regulator over alleged anti-competitive practices related to affordable housing contributions.
So a compromise to settle a dispute.
Essentially, yes. Addressing a long-standing issue about developers' responsibilities for contributing to affordable housing needs and perhaps avoiding stricter penalties.
This whole section really shows how technology, finance, even basic needs like food and housing are constantly being reshaped.
It underscores the deep influence of macroeconomic forces, regulatory decisions, and technological shifts on almost every aspect of our daily lives.
Okay, let's zoom in now on Africa. a continent that's becoming increasingly central in the global scramble for resources and development, especially concerning its vast mineral wealth.
Yeah, this is a really critical area right now. What's particularly significant is South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola. He's been urging the G20, that's the forum of the world's major economies, to address what he calls the unfair exploitation of Africa's critical mineral wealth.
Unfair exploitation. How?
He pointed out the long-standing pattern. Raw materials like platinum, vanadium, cobalt, lithium found abundantly in many African countries are often exported very cheaply from the continent. Then those same materials are processed elsewhere and re-imported back into Africa as expensive finished goods.
So Africa provides the raw materials, but doesn't get the benefit of the value-added manufacturing.
Exactly. It prevents local economic development, job creation, industrialization. He's calling for policies that support local processing and manufacturing, advancing something called a critical minerals framework as part of South Africa's G20 presidency this year. It's a powerful and, frankly, justified call for more equitable terms of trade and resource governance.
A critical push for economic justice, greater self-determination for African nations, makes sense. And other countries are definitely eyeing Africa's resources, right, like India.
Absolutely. India is actively looking to strengthen its economic and strategic ties with Namibia, which is a country in southern Africa rich in minerals.
What minerals is India interested in?
India is seeking to import uranium, which is vital for its nuclear energy sector, and also other crucial minerals like lithium, cobalt, and copper, all essential for its rapidly growing industrial sectors, electric vehicles, electronics, etc.
How are they pursuing this?
Indian public sector companies, state-owned enterprises, are exploring direct mining investments in Namibia. This push comes ahead of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's first visit to Windhoek, Namibia's capital, in 27 years. So it's a high-level strategic move.
Shows India's drive to secure essential resources, diversify its supply chains away from maybe traditional sources like China.
That seems to be a key motivation. And they're not alone. Russia is also intensifying its trade relationship with Africa.
Russia, beyond selling weapons or grain.
Yes. They're aiming to diversify their exports to Africa beyond just wheat and oil, which currently make up about 65% of their trade with the continent.
What else are they focusing on?
Russian fertilizer producers like Uralchem and Fosagro are significantly expanding their presence across Africa. And Russia's agricultural exports to Africa hit over $7 billion in 2024. It signals Russia's clear intent to build stronger, broader economic ties across the continent, likely seeking political influence as well.
So these developments, South Africa pushing for fair terms, India seeking minerals, Russia expanding trade, what's the bigger picture?
It collectively underscores Africa's growing strategic importance. As a source of critical minerals vital for the green transition and high-tech industries, and also as a rapidly expanding consumer market.
And it reveals a global competition playing out.
Definitely, a competition for resources, for influence, for market access. But importantly, African nations themselves are increasingly pushing back, demanding more equitable terms, more beneficial partnerships that actually foster local industrialization and job creation, not just resource extraction.
So the key question is, how is this global demand for essential minerals reshaping international relations and development priorities, particularly across the African continent?
It's a really dynamic and evolving story. One of resource diplomacy, geopolitical maneuvering, and hopefully a push towards more sustainable and equitable economic empowerment for Africa itself.
Okay, let's turn our attention now squarely to the environment and the relentless pressure our world is clearly facing from natural disasters. We've seen some truly devastating floods and wildfires just recently, impacting communities across the globe.
Yeah, the news has been sobering on this front. Texas, the large state in the southern United States, has experienced truly catastrophic floods. The reported death toll has climbed to 109, and sadly, over 160 people are still missing.
109 dead, 160 missing. That's just horrific. Where are the efforts focused?
Rescue and recovery efforts are ongoing, particularly in the hard-hit Kirk County area, which is a rural part of the Texas Hill Country. Tragically, 5 campers and 1 counselor from Camp Mystic, that's a Christian all-girls summer camp located right on the Guadalupe River, are among those missing.
Oh, no. Wasn't there something about inspections at that camp?
Yes, what's particularly concerning and raises questions is that state inspectors had reportedly approved Camp Mystic's emergency plan just 2 days before these deadly floods hit. And officials were apparently caught off guard by the sheer severity and speed of the flooding.
Approved plan, still caught off guard. It really raises significant questions about preparedness, about the adequacy of emergency response protocols when facing these increasingly extreme events.
It does. And Texas isn't alone in facing this kind of extreme weather tragedy. We saw reports that at least 8 people were killed and dozens are missing after monsoon rains triggered severe flooding right at the Nepal-China border.
What happened there?
The floods washed away the Friendship Bridge, which is a crucial transportation link between Nepal and China in that mountainous region. A major disruption, besides the human cost.
In the U.S. again, New Mexico.
Yes, flash flooding in the mountain village of Ruidoso, that's in the Sierra Blanca Mountains in the southwestern U.S., led to a devastating incident where an entire house was swept away by the water. 3 individuals inside, including children, were reported missing, just swept away.
Unimaginable. It feels like these extreme water events are happening everywhere.
It really does highlight a pattern. And then, switching from flood to fire, we have the situation in Europe. A fast-moving wildfire reached the outer edge of Marseille, which is France's second largest city, right on the Mediterranean coast.
A wildfire reaching a major city. Were there injuries?
Yes, unfortunately, more than 100 people were injured. 1,000 firefighters were mobilized to battle the blaze, which, last we heard, remained not fully contained, although its intensity was decreasing. Still, threatening urban areas is a scary development.
So these widespread incidents, catastrophic floods in Texas, Nepal, New Mexico, a major wildfire threatening Marseille. What's the connection?
Well, collectively, they just underscore the increasing frequency and intensity of extreme weather events globally. They highlight critical challenges in disaster preparedness and governmental response capabilities, and ultimately the tragic human cost that follows these events.
It forces you to ask, are these just isolated incidents, bad luck striking different places? Or do they point to a larger, interconnected global challenge, something linked to climate change that demands a fundamental reevaluation of how we live, how we build, how we prepare?
It certainly feels like the planet is sending some very strong messages.
Nah.
The pattern seems undeniable to many observers.
Speaking of climate change, we're seeing not just these impacts, but also data linking events directly to it, and even some innovative, if maybe unusual, policy responses emerging.
That's right. A recent study provided some stark numbers. It revealed that approximately 2,300 individuals across 12 major European cities succumbed to heat-related conditions during a recent severe heat wave.
2,300 deaths from heat. That's staggering.
It is, and what's crucial to understand from the study is that researchers attributed about 2/3 of those fatalities directly to the impact of climate change, meaning the heat wave was made significantly more deadly by the background warming trend.
So it's not just abstract models anymore. This is providing undeniable evidence of climate change's direct, deadly impact on public health, tangible human cost.
Exactly. Moving it from abstract concept to grim reality. Now, on a more proactive, though certainly unusual note, Australia has introduced something novel. They call it a climate visa. It's aimed specifically at Tuvaluans, the citizens of the small island nation of Tuvalu in the Pacific Ocean, which is famously threatened by rising sea levels.
A climate visa, what does it do?
It basically helps them make choices in the face of those rising seas that are threatening to swallow their homeland. It offers them a pathway to relocate to Australia with certain rights and support.
Wow, that's a really direct response to climate-induced migration.
It represents a proactive and, frankly, unprecedented national policy response to this growing issue. Climate displacement is only expected to increase as sea levels rise and extreme weather intensifies globally.
So this Australian initiative sparks a broader, vital discussion, doesn't it? How will nations manage population displacement due to environmental changes? We need long-term strategies for climate refugees.
We absolutely do. And as climate change impacts accelerate, societies will have to adapt. We'll likely see more new, perhaps controversial, policies like this emerge to cope with a changing planet and its displaced populations. This Australian visa might just be a preview of future global migration policies driven by climate.
A glimpse into a challenging future. Okay, beyond climate, our planet also presents inherent geological risks, and we're also seeing an increasing push for environmental accountability when damage is human-made.
Right. Japan, for example, a country highly susceptible to earthquakes due to its location on the Pacific Ring of Fire, has just approved significant upgrades to its national disaster plan.
Why now?
This is specifically aimed at safeguarding the public in the event of a major earthquake predicted for southern Japan. The urgency comes after an unprecedented swarm of earthquakes recently affected the Takara Islands, a small archipelago southwest of Kyushu. It was a wake-up call.
So a proactive measure based on recent warnings and known risks. Highlights the critical importance of robust disaster preparedness in vulnerable regions.
Exactly. It's reassuring in a way to see that level of preparation, especially from a country so experienced with seismic activity.
And then on the accountability side, an oil spill lawsuit.
Yes, a stark example of environmental accountability. The Indian state of Kerala, which is on India's tropical Malabar coast, has filed a massive $1.1 billion lawsuit against Mediterranean Shipping Company, or MSC.
MSC, one of the world's largest container shipping lines. Why the lawsuit?
It follows an incident where one of MSC's container vessels capsized in the Arabian Sea off the Indian coast. The ship spilled fuel and hazardous cargo, causing extensive environmental pollution that severely impacted marine life and coastal fisheries in the region.
$1 billion lawsuit. That sends a message.
It certainly does. This legal action underscores the growing international push for accountability for environmental damage caused by global shipping. It could serve as a significant precedent for future incidents.
So these two events, Japan preparing for earthquakes, Kerala suing over an oil spill, it seemed different, but maybe illustrate a dual challenge.
I think so. Managing inherent geological risks through preparedness, like Japan is doing, and holding entities responsible for environmental harm they cause, like Kerala is attempting. Both demand proactive measures, strict adherence to safety standards, and robust environmental regulations.
All right, let's shift our focus now towards societal issues, justice, and just the everyday lives of people around the world. Let's start with a look at protests, policing, and fundamental human rights, which always seem to be in flux.
Yeah, there have been some deeply concerning developments recently. In Kenya, the East African nation, recent anti-government protests have resulted in a really devastating toll. Reports indicate 31 individuals lost their lives in just a single day.
31 deaths in one day from protests.
Yes, the highest daily death toll related to protests there this year, and over 400 people were injured. Kenyans are expressing widespread outrage, particularly over incidents of alleged police violence, and calls for justice and accountability are growing much louder.
That highlights severe tensions, doesn't it? Between citizens and law enforcement, likely fueled by frustration over government policies and maybe perceived abuses of power.
It certainly points to profound discontent. And then a very different situation, but also deeply troubling. We have growing tensions surrounding Ukraine's strict military conscription efforts.
Conscription during wartime is always tough. What specifically happened?
There was a particularly tragic incident reported from the Kharkov region in eastern Ukraine. A woman in her 60s apparently died while trying to stop a van that she believed was transporting her son, who had allegedly been forcibly taken by military recruitment officers.
Oh my goodness, forcibly recruited. Is that common?
Well, Ukrainian MP Roman Kostenko has stated publicly that most draftees are, in fact, forcibly recruited now. It's a sentiment that Russian President Vladimir Putin has echoed, though naturally Ukraine's defense ministry denies it, calling such claims Russian propaganda. But the reports persist.
It just raises such difficult questions about the human cost of war, doesn't it? Not just on the front lines, but on the home front. The immense strains on individual liberties, on families desperately trying to protect their loved ones under extreme circumstances.
It's heartbreaking. Now, on a more hopeful note, shifting to historical justice.
Okay, some good news.
Yes, a moment of celebration, really. The grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo, the renowned Argentine human rights organization, recently announced the identification of the 140th grandchild who was stolen as a baby during Argentina's brutal military dictatorship back in the 70s and early 80s.
140th grandchild found. That's incredible persistence. Who was identified this time?
A 48-year-old man. He was born in captivity to political activists who were abducted and then disappeared by the regime. His identification is just a testament to decades of tireless, painstaking work by these women and the enduring quest for truth and family reunification.
Amazing dedication. So these incidents we've just discussed, mass protests and violence in Kenya, individual tragedies from conscription in Ukraine, the long fight for historical justice in Argentina, what connects them?
Well, they collectively underscore the fragility of human rights, don't they? And the ongoing struggle for justice in so many different parts of the world. They are powerful reminders of the enduring fight for dignity, for truth, for accountability offered against immense odds and profound societal challenges.
Indeed. Okay, next, let's explore how legal systems themselves are under strain in various places, often facing immense pressure to adapt to new realities, sometimes in controversial ways.
Right. In the UK, for example, a former senior judge has made a recommendation that's causing quite a stir.
What's the recommendation?
That thousands of criminal cases that would normally be heard in front of a jury should instead be decided by judges sitting alone without a jury. This would apply to cases in England and Wales.
Judge-only trials instead of jury trials. Why?
The stated goal is to reduce the record-high backlog in the courts. The system is overwhelmed with cases, and this is proposed as a way to speed things up and save the justice system from what the judge called total collapse.
Wow. But that's a huge change. Trial by jury is fundamental in many systems.
Exactly. This recommendation raises fundamental questions about the balance between judicial efficiency, getting cases processed quickly, and the right to a trial by jury, which is seen as a cornerstone of democratic legal systems globally.
It's a massive trade-off, isn't it? Potentially sacrificing a traditional legal protection, a safeguard against state power, for the sake of efficiency. What are the broader implications if a society considers such drastic measures? What could it do to public trust in the judiciary?
Those are precisely the questions being debated fiercely right now in the UK legal community and beyond. It's a very significant proposal.
Okay. And then, switching gears but still on legal systems and public trust, the Jeffrey Epstein case continues to generate controversy.
It does. A recently released two-page memo from the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI regarding Epstein's death back in 2019. Well, it was accompanied by some surveillance footage from the jail.
And what did the footage show? Or not show?
It apparently shows an unexplained 1-minute gap in the recording, right around the time relevant to his death, between 11:58 p.m. on August 9th and midnight on August 10th. Just missing footage.
A 1-minute gap.
Yeah.
Unexplained. That's bound to fuel suspicion.
Absolutely. This missing minute, however brief it might seem, has intensified the existing suspicions of foul play among many, particularly conservative figures and commentators online. They're openly accusing officials of a cover-up.
Even though the official investigation concluded it was suicide.
Yes. The DOJ concluded there was no foul play and also, importantly, no evidence of a supposed client list or a basis to investigate other uncharged individuals connected to Epstein. But this missing minute, this perceived lack of transparency, keeps the public mistrust simmering.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can a single missing minute in such a high-profile case continue to fuel so much public mistrust and demand for accountability, even years later, regardless of official findings?
It shows how quickly skepticism can take root and persist, especially when transparency is perceived to be lacking, rightly or wrongly. It erodes faith in the system.
Okay, let's round out our discussion on societal issues by looking at some of the key debates and health issues shaping our communities right now. These often reflect changing norms or persistent challenges.
Right. Starting with a really interesting debate in Ukraine. A petition advocating for the decriminalization of pornography production has been formally submitted to their parliament.
Decriminalizing porn production in Ukraine during a war.
Yes. It surpassed the 25,000 signature threshold needed for parliamentary consideration. The initiative argues that law enforcement resources should be redirected to more serious crimes, especially during wartime.
Makes sense from a resource perspective. Any other arguments?
Yes. They also acknowledge the potential for significant tax revenue from content creators, particularly mentioning platforms like OnlyFans, where many Ukrainian creators already operate and pay substantial taxes.
So it's this unique clash, isn't it? Evolving social norms around sex work and content creation, meeting the very real, urgent wartime economic needs of the country, finding revenue wherever they can.
It's a fascinating intersection, prompting a very different kind of national debate than you might expect under the circumstances.
Definitely. Okay, moving to the UK, a more everyday concern. School lunches.
Yes, reports indicate that school children across the UK are reportedly getting less meat, cheaper ingredients, and generally smaller portions in their school lunches.
Why is that happening?
Caterers are battling rising food costs and budget constraints. This raises immediate concerns about child nutrition, potential health implications down the line for a whole generation, and it really highlights the impact of inflation on public services and especially on the most vulnerable populations.
A basic need, like a nutritious school lunch, being compromised. That's worrying. What about healthcare workers?
Also in the UK, specifically England, resident doctors, junior doctors within the National Health Service, NHS, are set to go on a 5-day strike later this month, in July.
Another doctor's strike. What are they protesting?
Ongoing issues with working conditions and pay. This strike is expected to significantly impact hospital services, leading to canceled appointments and surgeries across the country, and raising widespread concerns about patient care and safety during that period.
It just highlights the immense strain public healthcare systems are under globally, doesn't it? staff pushing for better conditions amidst escalating demands and often limited resources.
It's a recurring theme in many countries.
Okay, a couple more societal notes. Advertising regulation.
Yes, the UK's advertising watchdog, the ASA, has banned a weight loss advert featuring a reality TV star named Gemma Collins.
Why was it banned?
For promoting a prescription-only weight loss drug directly to consumers, which is against the rules. It's part of a broader crackdown by the regulator on advertising violations, particularly around health claims and influencer marketing, trying to ensure ethical practices.
Good to see regulators stepping in there. And finally, a serious issue. Abuse in the music industry.
Yes, campaigners are working hard to highlight what they describe as pervasive sexual abuse and harassment within the music business. They stress it transcends genres, even beyond the issues sometimes highlighted in hip-hop.
What's enabling this, according to them?
They point to a deep-rooted culture of silence within the industry, one that protects predators, often powerful figures, and intimidates victims into staying quiet. Campaigners note the industry is still struggling to have its own Me Too moment, years after similar movements gained significant traction in film and other sectors.
A stark reminder that progress isn't always linear or universal across industries. So, these stories we've touched on, from public health concerns like school lunches and doctor strikes to cultural shifts like the porn debate in Ukraine and the demand for accountability in advertising and the music industry.
It paints a complex tapestry, doesn't it? Of human experience, moral dilemmas, evolving social norms.
Yeah, it makes you think, what do these ongoing evolutions and challenges tell us about that continuous balancing act societies face between individual freedoms, economic realities, and collective well-being in our ever-changing world?
It's a constant negotiation, and these stories show just how multifaceted it is.
All right, let's wrap things up today with a quick roundup of the day's top sporting events. A little lighter fare to end on, showcasing that global passion for competition, drama, and maybe some unexpected upsets.
Sounds good. Let's start on the football pitch, or soccer pitch for our North American listeners. Germany achieved a pretty significant milestone in a historic World Cup semifinal, securing their 7th consecutive victory in that tournament's history. Quite dominant.
7th straight win in World Cup semis. Impressive. And in the Euros.
In the ongoing Euro 2025 tournament, Leah Schiller scored the winning goal as Germany edged out Denmark 2-1. That positions them well for the knockout stage.
So, a big day for German football overall. What about the British teams in the Euros?
Well, across the channel, England and Wales are both preparing for high-stakes matches. They're both looking to avoid double elimination, meaning getting knocked out. Their qualification hopes are really hanging by a thread right now, lots of pressure.
High tension for the English and Welsh fans, then. Okay, staying in the UK, but off-the-pitch football governance.
Yes, UK members of Parliament have voted to make the Football Governance Bill into law. This establishes an independent regulator for men's professional football in England.
An independent regulator, what's the goal?
Aiming for more transparency and oversight in the sport's often murky financial dealings and club ownership structures. It's a significant step towards reforming how the game is run.
Interesting. And speaking of club fortunes, Crystal Palace.
Yes, their hopes for qualifying for European competition next season are now hanging in the balance. This comes after Lyon, a French club, secured a successful appeal against being relegated from France's top league, which might affect qualification spots. Lots of permutations.
Football finance and regulation, always complicated. Okay, let's switch to tennis. Wimbledon.
Over on the grass courts at Wimbledon, Carlos Alcaraz, the young Spanish sensation, delivered what was described as a masterful performance to end the run of Britain's Cameron Norrie in the tournament. Alcaraz looking very strong.
He's incredible to watch. What about basketball? WNBA All-Stars.
Yes, in the WNBA, two of the league's brightest stars, Caitlin Clark and Nafisa Collier, drafted their respective All-Star teams. Notably, Clark used her #1 pick to select her Indiana Fever teammate, Aaliyah Boston, showcasing their team camaraderie.
Nice move by Clark. Okay, back to global football, the Club World Cup.
On the international club scene, England's Chelsea defeated Fluminense of Brazil 2-0 to reach the final of the FIFA 2025 Club World Cup. A key factor was their debutante signing, João Pedro, who netted both goals, making an immediate, huge impact.
Great start for him at Chelsea, and a big shakeup in Formula One.
A massive one. Red Bull Racing, the dominant F1 team, fired their long-serving team principal, Christian Horner, after 20 years with the team. This is a truly significant leadership change that sent shockwaves through the pinnacle of motorsport. The reasons are still being debated.
20 years. That's huge news in F1. Okay, let's round out with a few other quick sports hits. NBA.
OKC's Chet Holmgren, a rising star for the Oklahoma City Thunder, agreed to a rookie max contract extension, locking him up long-term.
NFL.
The Washington Commanders revealed their alternate uniforms for the upcoming season, and they apparently paid tribute to the team's glory days with a nostalgic design, trying to connect with the past.
And finally, baseball.
The latest MLB power rankings show the Toronto Blue Jays and the Boston Red Sox are climbing, shaking up the playoff odds in Major League Baseball as the season progresses, always shifting dynamics.
Got it. A really rapid-fire roundup there. Showcases the global passion for competition, doesn't it? And the constant drama, both on and off the field, that keeps us all hooked.
Absolutely. From tactical master classes to shock firings, there's always something happening in the world of sports.
And that brings us to the end of another deep dive. Wow, what an incredibly dense and compelling day of news it's been, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely packed. We've covered such a breadth and depth of global events today. I mean, from the microscopic, genetically altered E. coli making medicine.
Right. To the truly macroscopic, massive geopolitical shifts, countries realigning. We even talk about recreating the conditions of the Big Bang at CERN. It's quite the range.
It really is. Our aim, as always, is to try and provide you with a comprehensive yet hopefully digestible understanding of the world's most important developments.
We know your time is valuable, and we really hope we've given you those essential nuggets, those surprising insights that help you cut through the noise and maybe see the bigger picture a little more clearly.
That's the goal.
So, as you go about your day, mull over everything we've discussed. We want to leave you with a provocative thought, something to chew on.
Okay, let's hear it.
Considering all the news we've unpacked today, I mean, from AI's evolving, maybe slightly scary role in society, to the shifting alliances in geopolitics, and the raw, undeniable power of nature we saw in those disasters. What single development do you believe will have the most profound and perhaps unexpected impact, either on your life personally or on the world more broadly, in the coming year?
That's a tough one. So many contenders. It really makes you think about the ripple effects, doesn't it? The ripple effects of today's headlines are already in motion, already shaping the future we'll all inhabit.
Exactly. Food for thought.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the most compelling stories of July 9th, 2025. Until next time.
Stay curious.